At Repton in 986 CE, 236 Norse women drank mercury rather than risk capture because they knew exactly what Vikings did to the wives of defeated warriors. The archaeologists found them in neat rows, mercury residue coating their teeth, their hands still clutching the clay vessels. Some held each other, mother and daughter, sisters, the youngest barely 15 winters old. Listen, you can almost hear it, the bubbling of liquid metal poured from iron cauldrons, the whispered prayers to Freya, the sobbing of those who hesitated before their friends helped tip the poison past their lips. These weren't slaves. The jewelry buried with them, silver arm rings, amber beads, bronze brooches, marked them as wives of jarls, women who'd commanded households, who'd worn keys at their belts as symbols of authority, who'd managed estates while their men went Viking. Now those men lay scattered across English fields, cut down at Tettenhall, butchered at Buttington, the great heathen army that had terrorized Britain for decades finally broken. And these women knew what came next. They'd seen it themselves, had maybe even given the orders, when Norse raiders brought home Saxon women, when Irish girls stumbled off the longships in chains, when Frankish nobles' daughters stood naked on the auction blocks. The mercury worked fast, metallic taste flooding their mouths, convulsions, frothing. Their last sight, the wooden beams of the longhouse where they'd chosen to die together rather than live what they'd inflicted on thousands. So, here's what haunts me, what keeps me awake at night after reading these archaeological reports. These women at Repton, they chose mercury poisoning. Think about that. Mercury, one of the most agonizing ways to die. Convulsions so violent they'd break their own bones. Blood frothing from their mouths. Their minds fracturing as the metal ate through their nerves. And they chose this. 236 of them chose this. Because whatever waited outside those longhouse doors was worse. What system of horror makes mercury seem merciful? Listen, that's the sound of an auctioneer calling prices in Old Norse. 20 silver for the young one. The words echo off wooden walls at Dublin's slave market. 793 CE. The year it all began. The Vikings had perfected their system. 3 price points. 20 silver pieces for virgin girls under 16. 15 for proven breeders. 10 for anyone over 30. The auctioneer's voice rises above the crying, above the prayers whispered in Irish, above the clanking chains. Wood Quay. That's where archaeologists found it. The infrastructure. Not some makeshift operation thrown together by raiders. Purpose-built warehouses, stone foundations, drainage channels carved into bedrock, iron rings bolted to walls at precise intervals. This wasn't opportunistic. This was industrial. The shackles tell their own story. Different sizes. The archaeologists catalogued them, measured them, weighed them. The largest ones, standard iron, but the medium ones, specially forged. Narrower, lighter, sized for women's wrists. And then there were the small ones, 4 inches in circumference. That's all. 4 inches. The archaeologists kept remeasuring, kept checking their calculations, but the numbers didn't change. These shackles were made for children, for wrists the size of a modern 7-year-old's. Here's what destroys me. King Aethelred's tax records from 812. He taxed the slave trade, made it official. 2 silver pieces per head sold through English ports. The bureaucracy of horror. Customs officials stamping documents while girls stumbled past in chains. The holding facilities stretched 300 feet along the Liffey. Separate sections, the virgins kept apart. Their value depended on it. The pregnant women in another area, close to the midwives. Can't lose the merchandise. The children. The children were kept where their mothers could see them but not reach them. Leverage. You want to know how systematic this was? They had veterinarians. Norse texts call them stock checkers. They examined teeth, felt for pregnancies, checked for diseases. Rejected the sick ones. Those got thrown in the river. The splash, the struggling, then silence. Dublin wasn't unique. Hedeby, Birka, Gotland. The same infrastructure appears everywhere. The same drainage channels, the same sized shackles, the same pricing structure in the records. From Iceland to the Black Sea, one massive machine for turning women into silver. But the warehouses weren't the worst discovery. What haunted the archaeologists, what made them stop digging for days, was something else entirely. The personal items. Scattered in the dirt beneath the holding cells, a child's wooden doll, a bone comb with strands of red hair still tangled in its teeth, a small bronze cross, its chain snapped. The wood key excavations revealed something else. Scratches on the walls, in Ogham script, in Latin, in runes, names, prayers, messages. Brigid was here. Christ have mercy. Remember, Ashling. Some carved with fingernails until they bled. The walls were covered. Generations of women leaving their marks. But here's where it gets worse. The drainage channels. At first, the archaeologists thought they were for waste, standard urban planning. Then they found the bones. Infant bones. Hundreds of them. Washed into special collection pits. Because newborns had no value, couldn't survive the sea journey. Bad for business. The smallest shackles told a different story. Some were decorative, etched with patterns, expensive metalwork. These weren't for Irish peasant children. These were for the daughters of nobles, of kings. Special orders from buyers who had a particular tastes. The Dublin market ran for 3 centuries, 300 years. Do the math. 20,000 women and children per year, based on tax records. 6 million souls. That's not a raid. That's not warfare. That's an economy. And the buyers? Norse settlers, yes, but also Saxons, Franks, even Byzantine merchants. The market books survived in fragments. Names, prices, destinations. Astrid, 16 winters, virgin, sold to Sven Forkbeard, 35 silver. Human beings reduced to inventory lines. What archaeologists found in the drainage channels would rewrite everything we thought we knew about Viking infrastructure. The drainage channels weren't just for waste. Listen closer. Hear that echo. Stone carved at precise angles, water flowing in controlled streams. The Dublin excavation team expected medieval sewers. They found an engineering masterpiece. 820 CE. The year Vikings turned slavery into science. Those channels? They connected everything. The auction blocks to the warehouses to the docks to the ships. One massive system designed to move human cargo without losing a single piece of merchandise. Water drips through ancient grooves. Each drop carries its own memory. The archaeologists followed those channels underground, mapped them. What they discovered made them call in specialists. Hydraulic engineers. These weren't random ditches. The gradient was calculated. 2% slope. Just enough to carry waste away, but not so steep that it would erode. But here's what stopped them cold. The channels split. Main arteries for general waste. But smaller channels, barely 8 inches wide, led somewhere else. The team followed them, crawling through centuries of sediment, their headlamps catching the chisel marks still fresh on the stone. The channels led to collection pools, limestone basins carved from single blocks. Why would slave traders need filtration systems? The answer was in the sediment, layers of it, each year preserved like tree rings. And in those layers, arsenic, mercury residue, lead deposits, arsenic traces. They weren't filtering out waste. They were filtering out poison. The warehouses above told their own story. 200-person capacity. That's what the foundations supported. Post holes every 6 feet. Iron rings between them. The archaeologists reconstructed it, drew it out, calculated the space. 3 square feet per person. Just enough to sit, not enough to lie down. Drainage beneath, ventilation above. Small holes drilled through oak beams. Airflow calculated to keep merchandise alive but weak. Too much oxygen, and they might fight back. Too little, and you lose inventory. The Vikings had figured out the exact ratio, but Dublin was just the beginning. 830 CE. York. The archaeologists there found something that made Dublin's warehouses look humane. They weren't expecting it. Just another urban dig. Then they hit the timber. preserved in the waterlogged soil, massive beams, joinery work that belonged in a king's hall. The structure spread out beneath modern Coppergate. They excavated carefully, revealed it inch by inch. This wasn't a warehouse. The construction was too elaborate, the spaces too carefully divided. Then they found the metal fittings, specialized hardware, hinges designed for repeated use, locks with multiple pins, processing facilities. That's what they'd built, not just storage. Active sorting centers. The wood still showed the wear patterns, grooves where chains had rubbed for decades, stains that chemical analysis revealed as human waste, blood, other fluids the archaeologists wouldn't name in their reports. Sound carries differently underground. The York facility was built with acoustic chambers, small rooms where sounds would amplify, where screams would echo, where other captives would hear everything. Psychological infrastructure. Break them before they ever reached the ships. The restraint systems weren't random either. Different configurations for different purposes. Standing restraints along the walls, horizontal platforms in the center, overhead beams with pulley systems. The Vikings had industrialized every aspect of human degradation. But wait, the trade routes. That's where the real infrastructure investment went. 840 CE. The eastern routes opened. Constantinople, Baghdad. Markets where pale northern women brought premium prices. The logistics stagger the mind. 3,000 miles. Open ocean. River systems. Portages. How do you move human cargo that far? The answer was in the ship modifications. Archaeologists found them in Hedeby Harbour. Preserved keels. Hull configurations that didn't match any known cargo vessels. These ships had been retrofitted. Extra beam width. Lower deck heights. Ventilation systems built into the hull itself. They calculated the capacity. 50 to 70 women per ship. Stacked in tiers. Just enough headroom to sit upright. The ventilation gaps would let in sea spray, salt water, keeping wounds from healing, preventing infection from spreading too fast. Everything calculated. The Dnieper route revealed more infrastructure, way stations every 40 miles, fortified compounds, fresh water sources, slave pens built to standard specifications, the same drainage systems, the same restraint points, the same collection pools. From Novgorod to Kiev to the Black Sea, one continuous pipeline. Each station had its specialists. Ship provisioners who knew exactly how much food kept captives alive but dependent. Medical staff who could treat injuries that might lower value. Guards trained in subdual techniques that left no visible marks. The Vikings had created entire professions around human trafficking. But the infrastructure went beyond physical structures. They developed financial instruments, credit systems. A woman taken in Ireland could be sold on promise in Constantinople. Letters of credit, standardized pricing, insurance against loss in transit, the birth of international banking, written in human misery. The archaeological evidence keeps mounting. Specialized tools, branding irons with merchant marks, scales calibrated for human weight, manifest logs with pre-printed columns, species, age, condition, origin, destination, sale price, like shipping forms, but for people. In York, archaeologists would uncover something that made Dublin's warehouses look humane. The archaeologist's gasp echoes through the excavation pit. Her headlamp catches something that shouldn't exist. York, Coppergate. What they're uncovering beneath the medieval street makes her reach for her supervisor. 64 cells. That's what they found. Each one 6 feet by 4 feet. Stone walls between them. No windows. Drainage channels connecting every chamber. The supervisor arrives. Takes one look. Orders everyone out except the senior team. This wasn't a prison. The construction was too specific. Too specialized. They mapped it room by room. Photographed every detail. The wear patterns on the stone told their own story. Grooves worn smooth, not from chains, from human bodies, from the same repetitive movements, year after year after year. Listen, that's the sound of a metal detector screaming. The team sweeps each cell. The readings are off the charts. Iron, everywhere. But not in the walls, in the floor, absorbed into the earth itself, decades of blood seeping into Yorkshire clay. Cell 23 changed everything. The archaeologist, her name was Dr. Sarah Whitfield. She was the first one in. Her breath fogs in the underground cold. She's documenting the wall scratches when she sees them. Tiny finger bones, infant finger bones, pressed into the mortar between stones. The cells weren't empty when found. 876 CE. The year the York facility opened, the Vikings had learned from Dublin, evolved their methods. This wasn't about storage anymore. The bone evidence revealed the truth. Pelvic scarring, calcium depletion. These women had given birth, multiple times, in these cells. Dr. Whitfield's voice cracks on the recording. Subject shows evidence of 4 to 6 pregnancies. Age at death, approximately 22 years. Malnutrition indicators present. Repeated trauma too. She stops. Can't continue. Another team member takes over. The layout made sense now. 64 cells arranged in a square. Central courtyard with drainage. Guards could monitor everything from one position. But monitor what? The answer was in the artifacts. Feeding tubes. Restraint hardware designed for pregnant women. Midwifery tools. This was a breeding facility. 40 years. That's how long it operated. The dendrochronology confirmed it. From 876 to 916. 40 years of forced pregnancies. 40 years of stolen infants. 40 years of women dying in 6x4 stone cells. The DNA evidence destroyed every comfortable myth. These weren't all foreign captives. 30% showed Norse genetics. The Vikings were breeding their own women too. Anyone who couldn't pay debts. Anyone who defied authority. Anyone declared legally enslaved. But here's what made Dr. Whitfield call the police. Made them treat it as a crime scene even after 1,000 years. The position of the bodies. They weren't scattered, weren't random. These women had died in rows, organized, simultaneous, mass execution. Number weight. The toxicology revealed something else. No violence markers, no weapon trauma. These women had been poisoned. Mercury in their bones. Just like Repton. They'd chosen the same escape. Church records revealed the unthinkable. The York Minster Archives. Father Benedict's accounting scrolls. 900 CE. Right there in Latin. Received 40 silver pieces for rental of adjacent properties, for use by Norse merchants. The church owned the buildings next door. The church collected rent. The church knew. Pages rustle as researchers translate. Every payment recorded. Every year accounted for. The facility generated £200 of silver annually. Tithes were paid. 10% to the church. Blood money sanctified. The breeding program had quotas. 12 infants per cell per year. That's 768 babies annually. Where did they go? Transport records from Jorvik's docks answer that. Ships left monthly. Cargo manifests list young stock. Destination, Iceland, Norway. The Rus settlements. Wherever Norse families needed, slaves raised from birth. Loyal, obedient, never knowing freedom. Dr. Whitfield found something else. Personal items hidden in wall crevices. A bone needle. Thread made from human hair. Tiny garments. The women had been sewing baby clothes. In the dark. By touch. For infants they'd never see again. The excavation revealed the sorting area. Newborns evaluated within hours. Males to one side. Females to another. The weak ones. Those drainage channels served multiple purposes. The archaeologists found the tiny bones downstream. Hundreds of them. But wait. The technology. 900 CE and they had running water. Heated floors. The hypercourse system usually meant Roman influence. But this was Norse engineering. They'd invested in infrastructure. Made sure their breeding stock survived winters. Maximized output. The medical facilities shocked even hardened archaeologists. Surgical tools. Birthing chairs. Herb preparation areas. They'd employed healers. Kept the women alive through multiple pregnancies. Prolonged their suffering for profit. Cell 41 held one final revelation. Scratched into the stone. not in runes, in Latin. Elfgifu, 23 winters, 6 sons taken. My soul dies with each. Below it, in different hand, she stopped eating. Day 40, we sang her to Valhalla, my soul. Even here, even in this hell, they tried to save each other. The York facility produced approximately 30,000 slaves over 40 years. Conservative estimate, based on survival rates, based on successful pregnancies, based on how many women's bodies gave out. But breeding was only phase 1 of a 3-phase system. Listen, that's the grinding of stone against stone. A Norse woman crushing henbane seeds in her mortar. 850 CE. The Gotland excavations revealed her workshop intact. Mortars, pestles, clay vessels still stained purple from nightshade, glass vials that once held mercury. The Vikings had turned chemistry into control. Dr. Erik Lindqvist found her, the herbalist, buried with her tools. The analysis of her workspace revealed 37 different compounds: henbane, hemlock, wolfsbane, mercury salts, arsenic powders. But here's what made him step back from the excavation table. These weren't medicines. The concentrations were all wrong. Too pure, too refined. The drugs weren't meant to kill. Henbane in small doses causes hallucinations, compliance, memory gaps. The Vikings knew this, had known it for generations. The residue patterns in those mortars showed repeated use. The same recipes, the same measurements, standardized doses for standard purposes. The Gotland workshop connected to something larger. Stone channels led from her grinding room to holding areas. The drugged women could be moved without resistance, without memory, without the ability to testify later about what happened in those chambers. 873 CE, Portmarnock, Ireland. The peat cutter's scream echoes across the bog. They found her, preserved for 1,000 years. Every detail perfect, her red hair still braided, her fingernails still painted with ochre, her stomach still full of henbane seeds. Dr. Maeve Collins led the excavation team. What they uncovered rewrote everything. This wasn't a ritual sacrifice. The body position was wrong. The bindings were different. This woman had been disposed of, thrown away. But why preserve the body so carefully first? Mercury. The answer was mercury. Her tissues were saturated with it. Not enough to kill quickly, just enough to cause madness, tremors, hallucinations. The Vikings had been experimenting, testing dosages, using Irish women as subjects. The bog preserved everything, even the expression on her face, eyes wide, mouth open. She'd been conscious when they threw her in, conscious but paralyzed. The henbane cocktail had left her aware but unable to move, unable to scream as the bog water filled her lungs. But she wasn't alone. The Portmarnock bog held 17 more bodies, all women, all showing the same mercury saturation, all with the same henbane residue, all disposed of when the experiments went wrong. Dr. Collins found something else. Scarring patterns. Not random violence, systematic, measured. The same locations on each body, the same depth of cuts, the same healing times between injuries. Someone had been taking notes, recording reactions, perfecting techniques. Each fracture told the same story. The Uppsala Medical Collection, 900 CE. Norse physicians keeping detailed records, not for healing, for breaking. They documented exactly how much force caused specific injuries, how long recovery took, how to maximize pain without causing death. Skeletal analysis across Scandinavia revealed the pattern. Hundreds of female skeletons, all showing the same injury sequences. Right ulna fractured first, then left radius, then ribs, then pelvis. A standardized progression, a training manual written in broken bones. The drugs enhanced everything. Henbane before the violence made memories uncertain, made testimony unreliable. Mercury afterward caused symptoms that looked like madness. Who would believe a mercury-poisoned slave's accusations? But the chemistry went deeper. The Vikings had discovered drug combinations. Henbane with alcohol, mercury with lead salts. Compounds that left women conscious but compliant, aware, but unable to resist. The perfect chemical restraints. 890 CE. The Birka graves, mass burial of 12 women, all showing mercury poisoning, all with healing fractures, all with evidence of repeated pregnancies. But one skeleton stood out. Grave number 734. She was different, older, maybe 35. Her bones told a unique story. The same fracture patterns but healed differently. Healed completely. Multiple times. She'd survived the system longer than any others. 7 years at least. Her teeth held the final clue. Worn down. Not from age. From grinding. From clenching against pain. But also from something else. File marks. She'd sharpened her teeth. Made them weapons. The depth of the marks showed years of patient work. DNA from beneath her fingernails survived. Male DNA. Norse male DNA. She'd fought back. Drawn blood. Left evidence. Even after 7 years of systematic torture, she'd kept fighting. The excavation shifted. This wasn't just another victim. Her grave goods were different. Hidden beneath standard slave artifacts. A small knife. Runic inscriptions. A silver pendant that didn't belong. These weren't buried with her. She'd hidden them. Accumulated them. Prepared. One woman's skeleton revealed she had survived this system for 7 years before escaping. But escape to where? The answer lay in something the Gotland workshop revealed. Not all the compounds were for control. Some were antidotes. Some were healing salves. Some were poison. Fast-acting poison. The kind that looked like natural death. The herbalist hadn't just been dosing slaves. She'd been teaching them, passing on knowledge, creating a network of women who understood mercury's effects, who knew henbane's doses, who could turn the Vikings' own weapons against them. The bog bodies weren't all victims. Some were failed experimenters, women who'd tried to poison their captors and miscalculated, who'd tested mercury doses on themselves to build immunity, who'd died perfecting the cocktails they'd eventually share. 895 CE, the year the Whisper network solidified. Archaeological evidence shows a shift. Fewer drugged bodies, more poisoned Vikings, more women dying by mercury. Their own choice, their own timing. The knowledge had spread from Dublin to York to Gotland. The Vikings responded with new methods. But they'd created something they couldn't stop. Women who understood chemistry, who knew pain's limits, who had nothing left to lose. One surviving runestone tells the story. Here lies Thorstein, strong in battle, weak at his own table. The metaphor was clear to those who could read it. He'd been poisoned by someone who served his food, someone he'd never suspected. The systematic violence had created systematic resistance. The very infrastructure of control became the network of rebellion. Workshops teaching chemistry, cells passing knowledge, drainage channels carrying more than waste. They carried messages, carried compounds, carried hope. The Vikings had industrialized horror. The women industrialized their response. But chemistry was just one tool. What archaeologists found next would reveal how Viking culture itself had been engineered to enable this system. The marriage laws, the property rights, the religious justifications, all of it designed to turn women into commodities. The drugs had made it possible, but the culture had made it profitable. The sound of vellum pages turning, dust motes dancing in archive light. 880 CE, the Gragas law codes, Iceland's founding legal documents, paragraph after paragraph outlining women's legal status, or rather, their lack of it. The name starts as a whisper, grows to a murmur, becomes a battle cry that sends Norse raiders scrambling for their ships. Gunnhild. Just that single word makes hardened warriors check the shadows, makes them post double guards, makes them abandon camps they've held for years. 923 CE. The Irish coast. A slave ship limps into Dublin harbour with half its human cargo missing. The captain's report survives in fragments. 23 taken in the night. Guards found with crushed windpipes, no alarm raised. His hands shake as he writes. The ink splatters. Listen to the harbour master's breathing quicken as he reads. This is the 3rd ship this month. The pattern's identical. Young women vanish. Guards die silently. But here's what terrifies him. The chains are unlocked. Not broken. Unlocked. Someone has keys. The investigations reveal nothing. No witnesses, no trails. Just that name carved into dock posts, scratched onto warehouse walls. Gunnhild was here. The merchants hire more guards. Install better locks. It doesn't matter. The liberations continue. 924 CE. Hedeby. The screaming starts at midnight, not from the slave pens from the guardhouse. By dawn, 12 Norse warriors lie dead, throats opened with surgical precision. The holding facilities empty. 40 women gone, blood pooled in perfect circles around each corpse. The survivor's testimony chills even battle-hardened Jarls. She moved like smoke, knew every blind spot, every guard rotation. His voice cracks. She smiled as she cut Magnus's throat, whispered something in Irish. The freed women, they sang as they followed her into the forest. But here's what the Norse leaders can't understand, can't accept: the tactical knowledge, guard schedules, warehouse layouts, drug dosages. This isn't some lucky escaped slave. This is someone who knows their system from the inside. Someone who spent years studying every weakness. The burnt remains of Gunnhild's first target tell the story. A breeding facility outside Uppsala, sophisticated operation, 20 cells, full medical staff. The fire started simultaneously in 6 locations. The women were already gone when the flames reached the rafters. But the guards were still chained in their own cells. 925 CE. The attacks escalate. Coordinated strikes. Multiple locations. Same night. Dublin loses a warehouse. York's dock facilities burn. Gotland's slave market collapses into its own drainage channels. 300 miles apart. Simultaneous. Impossible. Unless you have a network. The Vikings find evidence in the ashes. Runic messages. But not standard runes. Modified. A code only certain women can read. The orders are precise. Target lists. Facility blueprints. Guard names and habits. Gunnhild isn't just freeing slaves. She's recruiting soldiers. Her methods evolve with each raid. The first ones were about stealth, silent kills, quick escapes. But by 926, she's leaving messages. Guards found arranged in Norse death ritual positions, their own slave branding irons heated and applied. The screams would have lasted hours. The merchant guilds pool resources, hire the best trackers, promise fortunes for her capture. The hunters find camps, always abandoned, always booby-trapped. One tracker loses 3 fingers to a spring-loaded blade hidden in a bedroll. Another steps into a pit lined with sharpened stakes. The medical report notes the stakes were coated with something, henbane extract. He died hallucinating. But Gunnhild makes one mistake, leaves one clue. A survivor from the Orkney raid, a young guard who played dead among the corpses. He saw her face, described her. The scar pattern was distinctive. Branded cheek, Norse merchant mark, property of Hakon Grimsson, of Trondheim. The records exist. Hakon's estate archives, 915 CE, Irish female, 16 winters, high quality, assigned to household duties. That's all. But cross-reference with birth records, breeding logs. There at Island, 4 live births, 2 males, 2 females, all sold at weaning. She'd been in the system 8 years. 8 years of rape, forced pregnancy, watching her children sold. Then something changed. Hakon's death record, 922 CE. Died of sudden illness, stomach ailment. The symptoms match mercury poisoning. Gunnhild had learned from the best teachers, the system itself. 927 CE. The resistance has structure now. Military hierarchy, intelligence networks, safe houses. The freed women don't just disappear. They join, train, learn. The girl saved from Dublin becomes tomorrow's raid leader. The child rescued from York grows into an expert poisoner. Norse merchants wake to find their personal slaves gone, their guards drugged, their strongboxes empty, but nothing else touched. The message is clear. We could have killed you. We chose not to. This time, the psychological warfare intensifies. Merchants' wives receive packages. Small bundles, inside baby clothes, the kind made in breeding facilities, the kind their husbands' businesses produce. No message needed, the implication clear. Your comfort is built on dead children. Some wives burn the packages, others ask questions. A few vanish in the night, taking their daughters. The social fabric tears, Norse women discovering what their prosperity costs. Some choosing sides their husbands never expected. 928 CE. Gunnhild's forces hold territory now, fortified positions. The rescued women need somewhere safe, somewhere to heal, to train, to plan. The Norse try to retake these strongholds, lose hundreds of warriors to defenders who know exactly how Vikings fight, who use their own tactics against them. But here's what truly terrifies the Jarls: the demographic shift. Thousands of women freed, thousands of Norse warriors dead, the gender balance tilting. Whole districts where Norse men can't find wives, where bloodlines face extinction, where the economic engine of slavery stutters and stalls. The contemporary accounts describe her appearance at Thing meetings, standing at the edge of firelight, just visible enough to be recognized, speaking fluent Norse, reciting the names of stolen children, the dates they were sold, the prices they brought, then melting back into darkness before guards can react. 929 CE. Treaty negotiations begin, not because the Norse developed conscience, because Gunnhild's network has grown too powerful to destroy. She controls trade routes, holds strategic positions, commands loyalty from thousands who've suffered under Viking rule. The economic reality forces compromise. But Gunnhild doesn't negotiate. The messengers return missing fingers, carrying terms written in perfect runes. Release all slaves, dissolve the breeding facilities, execute the worst offenders, pay blood money for the dead. The amount specified, calculated. 30 years of horror with compound interest. The Jarls laugh. Initially. Then Gunnhild takes Hedeby. Not raids it, takes it, holds it. The premier trading centre of the Viking world under her control. The merchant fleets burned in the harbour. The slave markets converted to barracks. The breeding facilities. The women she rescued insisted on burning those themselves. The screaming lasted 3 days. Not from victims, from Vikings trapped inside. 930 CE. The last confirmed Gunnhild action. Mass poisoning at the Uppsala Thing. 70 Jarls dead at their own feast. Mercury in the mead. The serving women, all recent additions to noble households, vanish before the convulsions start. They leave behind a single runic inscription. Your own medicine tastes bitter. After that, she disappears from records. Some say she died, others that she sailed west. But the network she built survived, evolved. For the next 50 years, Viking slaving operations face constant sabotage, mysterious fires, poisoned guards, empty warehouses, an invisible army of women who learned that resistance could be industrialized too. The archaeological evidence supports this. Slavery infrastructure shows consistent damage patterns after 930, rebuilding attempts that fail, security modifications that don't work. The Vikings adapt but never fully recover. The golden age of their slave economy ends with a whispered name. Historians debate Gunnhild's identity, whether she was one person or many, whether the name became a title, a rallying cry. But the slaves knew. The women she freed knew. The children she saved knew. She was real. She was fury incarnate. She was proof that no system of horror lasts forever. Her true monument isn't in stone. It's in the DNA. Modern populations in former Viking territories show genetic markers, survival patterns, bloodlines that shouldn't exist. Descendants of women who should have died in cells. Who lived because someone named Gunnhild decided that Vikings should fear the dark too. 7 years, 300 camps destroyed, thousands freed, hundreds of Vikings dead by their own methods, an economy shattered, a culture forced to confront its atrocities, all because one woman spent 8 years learning exactly how the system worked. But Gunnhild's success triggered a Viking response that would echo in genetic code forever. The breeding programs went underground, evolved, became something even more systematic. The war between slavers and liberators was just beginning. And the women at Repton? They'd seen how that war would end. Listen, that's the sound of a DNA test loading. The progress bar crawls across the screen. 60%, 70, 80. Complete. The results blink into existence. Maternal lineage. 60% Celtic origin. The cursor hovers over those words. Behind them lies 1,000 years of systematic horror. The lab tech in Reykjavik steps back from her computer. This can't be right. She runs the test again. Same results. 60% of Icelandic maternal DNA traces to the British Isles. Not Norse. Celtic, Irish, Scottish. Women who never chose to sail north. But Iceland tells only part of the story. Oslo. 900 samples tested. 40% British maternal ancestry. Trondheim. 38%. Bergen. 42%. The numbers don't lie. Can't lie. Written in nucleotides and chromosomes, every marker tells a woman's story, a story that began in chains. The genetic conquest of the North Atlantic, that's what modern science reveals. Not settlement, not migration, conquest, written in the DNA of entire populations. The Y chromosomes tell one story, Norse males spreading across the map. The mitochondrial DNA tells another, captive women, forced pregnancies, industrial-scale genetic colonization. Dr. Agnar Helgason publishes his findings. 2005. The academic world recoils. These aren't statistics. They're testimony. Each percentage point represents thousands of women, ripped from homes, packed in ships, forced to bear their captors' children. Listen closer. You can hear the echoes in modern voices. That Icelandic grandmother's lilt, it carries Irish Gaelic rhythms. That Norwegian folk song, its melody born in Scottish Highlands. The genetic ghosts speak through their descendants, refuse to be silenced. The numbers were too consistent to be voluntary, too systematic. This wasn't Vikings falling in love with local women. The ratios are wrong for that. The geographic spread too uniform. From Iceland to the Faroes to the Scottish Islands, the same pattern, the same percentages, the same story written in DNA. 870 CE to 1000 CE. The peak centuries. When Viking raiders transformed into Viking settlers. When temporary raids became permanent occupation. When stolen women became founding mothers of new populations. Against their will. Always against their will. Modern Icelanders celebrate their settlement saga. The brave Vikings who discovered an empty island, built a civilization from nothing. But the DNA tells the truth. Half their founding mothers never saw Iceland by choice, never wanted to birth a new nation, were forced to become ancestors. The testing continues. Deeper analysis, more refined techniques, individual lineages traced back. This woman's line begins with a girl stolen from Donegal. That one traces to the Hebrides. Another to Northumbria. Each marker a breadcrumb trail leading back to violence. But here's what shatters comfortable myths. The diversity. These weren't all peasant women. The genetic markers show variety. Different social classes. Different regions. The Vikings weren't selective. They took whoever they could. Whoever couldn't run fast enough. Whoever lived too close to the coast. The Orkney DNA project reveals even darker truths. Modern Orcadians, 25% Scandinavian overall, but break it down by gender. Male lines, 30% Norse. Female lines, 15%. The mathematics of occupation. Norse men bred with local women. Norse women mostly stayed home. Each generation deepened the conquest. First generation, Teye, pure captives. Second generation, children who never knew their mother's homeland. Third generation, DAS, the Celtic languages start dying. Fourth generation, MDE, new identity emerges. Not Irish, not Norse, something forged in systematic violence. Dr. Helgason's team digs deeper, comparing ancient DNA from archaeological sites with modern populations. The timeline becomes clear. Massive influx of Celtic female DNA between 850 and 950 CE. Then it stops. Abruptly. The genetic signature of Gunnhild's war, when taking slaves became too dangerous, too costly. But the damage was done, written into every cell, passed down through centuries. Modern Scandinavians carrying the proof of their ancestors' crimes. Modern Celts missing entire genetic branches. Bloodlines that should exist but don't. Because those women died in York, in Dublin, at sea, in breeding cells. The science keeps revealing more. Lactose tolerance genes, disease resistance markers, all flowing one direction, from Celtic populations into Norse. The captive women didn't just bear children, they shaped entire populations, changed what it meant to be Scandinavian, their revenge written in proteins and enzymes. Some modern Icelanders take tests hoping to prove pure Norse ancestry, find their roots, connect to Vikings. Instead they find Brigid from Kerry, Aoife from Galway, Mairead from Skye, names lost, stories erased, but the DNA remembers, always remembers. The population genetics tell an economic story too. Iceland needed women, Greenland needed women, every new settlement needed women, but Norse women wouldn't come, too dangerous, too harsh. So they took Celtic women, called it necessity, called it God's will, called it anything but what it was, genetic imperialism. Listen to that clicking keyboard. Another descendant searching ancestry websites, finding that 60%, that 40%, those markers that lead back to slave ships, to auction blocks, to women who chose mercury over survival, because they knew their daughters would face the same fate, their granddaughters, every generation until someone stopped it. Modern technology revealing ancient horror, each test processed, each result delivered, each family tree growing roots that pierce comfortable lies. The Viking Age wasn't just about warriors and exploration. It was about systematic genetic conquest, and the evidence lives in every Scandinavian's blood. But DNA tells only half the story. What archaeologists found next revealed how Viking society itself was engineered to enable this system. Laws, property rights, social structures, all designed to turn women into commodities, all preserved in perfect detail. As Viking power peaked, their victims developed a terrifying new strategy. The women weren't just fighting back anymore, they were infiltrating, learning, turning Viking methods against Viking flesh. The bell tower shakes as bronze meets bronze, 300 strokes per minute, faster than any human hand should pull. The nuns below know what that rhythm means, hoofbeats already thundering up the valley road. 912 CE. Whitby Abbey. Sister Elfrida counts the riders through arrow slits. 23 Norse warriors. But something's wrong. They're not spreading out, not surrounding the walls. They're fleeing. Behind them, local Saxons carry torches, pitchforks, anything sharp. The hunters have become hunted. The Norse wheel their horses, searching for sanctuary. Their eyes find the abbey walls. Stone means safety. Stone means negotiation. The bell rope snaps. Too much strain. The silence hits harder than the clanging. Sister Elfrida watches the lead rider approach the gates. His voice cracks as he begs, in broken Latin. In desperate Norse, the irony tastes like copper coins. Vikings seeking sanctuary in a convent. Mother Abbess Hilda emerges. 60 winters old, survived 4 Viking raids. Her voice carries across the courtyard. You who burned Lindisfarne seek shelter here. The Norse leader slides from his horse. Actually kneels. Actually begs. The statistics were staggering. Between 900 and 950 CE, Saxon convent populations increased 300%, not from religious awakening, from desperation, fathers bringing daughters, husbands bringing wives. Better the veil than Viking chains. Whitby alone grew from 40 nuns to over 200. The dormitories overflowed. They built new walls, higher, thicker, with archer platforms. These weren't just convents anymore. They were fortresses, fortresses that prayed. But prayer wasn't their only weapon. Listen, that's the sound of shears on flesh. Not cutting hair for tonsure, cutting deeper. 918 CE. Coldingham Priory. The Vikings are 2 miles away. The nuns gather in the chapel. Their leader, Ebba the Younger, holds the blade steady. She cuts off her own nose first, then her upper lip. Blood streams into her habit, soaks the floor. She passes the shears. Each nun follows, disfiguring themselves, making themselves worthless as slaves, as breeders, as anything but corpses. The Vikings arrive to find a chapel of mutilated women, still praying, still bleeding, still defiant. The raiders' own sagas record their response. Disgust, rage. They barred the doors, set the building ablaze. The singing inside continued until the roof collapsed. But Coldingham sparked something. Word spread between convents, through merchant gossip, through fleeing refugees, through the whisper networks that connected every religious house. The mathematics were simple. Temporary disfigurement meant permanent freedom. 920 CE. The practice systematized. Convents kept special blades, practiced the cuts. Some developed techniques that minimized scarring, that could heal if the raids passed by. Others went further. Brands, acid, anything that made them unmarketable. The Norse adapted too, started taking older women, using them for labor instead of breeding. The convents responded. Broken fingers couldn't work looms. Severed tendons couldn't carry water. The escalation continued. Each protection met with new cruelty. But the convents hid a darker purpose. The underground passage breathes with its own wind, carved through bedrock, connecting Whitby to 3 other convents. 20 miles of tunnels. The archaeologists' lights catch tool marks. Decades of digging. Generations of secret expansion. 925 CE. The tunnel system activates. Viking raiders hit Hackness Abbey. Take 30 young women. By sunset, all 30 have vanished. The Vikings torture the remaining nuns. No one talks. No one knows anything. The captives are simply gone. 3 days later, Irish fishing boats report unusual passengers. Women with shaved heads, Saxon accents, sailing west, away from Viking territory. The Underground Railroad of the Middle Ages, powered by nuns who'd learned that God helps those who help themselves. The logistics stagger belief. False deaths staged, bodies substituted, documents forged. Mother Abbess Hilda's own records survive. Coded. Hidden in prayer books. Received 30 souls, departed 30 souls, different vessels, same spirits. The metaphor clear to those who knew. Each convent specialized. Whitby created false identities. Hackness provided medical treatment. Lastingham taught new languages. Reavolks arranged transport. The Vikings might take women from one location. By the time they reached markets, those women had vanished, replaced, transformed, free. The Viking frustration shows in their escalation. Whole convents burned, nuns slaughtered whether young or old. But the network adapted. Watchers in every port, sympathizers among Norse women, even corrupted guards who'd take silver to look away. 930 CE. The Bishop of York's letters survive. Complaining, demanding. These convents barely pray anymore. They train fighters, harbor fugitives, forge documents, run spy networks. What happened to contemplation? To proper religious devotion? Mother Hilda's response survives too. Single line, perfect Latin. We contemplate survival. 5. The physical evidence supports this transformation. Convent excavations reveal weapons training grounds, archery butts, sword practice posts. The nuns weren't just hiding, they were learning, preparing. The Vikings had created a generation of warrior women. They just wore habits instead of armor. But defense wasn't enough. Some convents took the fight to their attackers. 932 CE. A Viking supply convoy burns outside Durham. No survivors. Witnesses report seeing riders in religious robes, moving with military precision, vanishing into morning mist. The Norse sagas mention them, call them Christ's Valkyries, women who appeared from nowhere, struck like lightning, disappeared like smoke. The descriptions match. Former nuns, former captives, trained by the underground networks, armed with Viking weapons. using Viking tactics. The resistance cells grew, connected, shared intelligence. By 940 CE, Vikings couldn't move through Northumbria without convent watchers tracking them, couldn't establish camps without midnight raids, couldn't hold captives without rescue attempts. But here's what terrified the Vikings most: the demographic shift. Thousands of women vanishing into convents, refusing marriage, refusing children, the Saxon population cratering, whole bloodlines ending. The Vikings had broken something fundamental: the will to continue. Some convents went further, became hospitals, not for healing, for ending pregnancies. Women arrived carrying Viking children, left without them. The archaeological evidence is clear: specialized medical tools, herbal preparations, burial grounds with specific markers. The convents had industrialized abortion. The Vikings tried infiltration, sending their own women as false converts. It never worked. The screening process was too thorough, the networks too careful, the coded languages too complex. Every plant had 3 names, every person 5 identities, every route 10 alternatives. By 945 CE, the convent networks controlled more intelligence than most kingdoms. They knew Viking numbers, movements, weaknesses, sold information to Saxon lords, to Irish kings, to anyone fighting Norse expansion. The gold flowed, the walls grew higher, the weapons multiplied. But when Viking power began to crack, they turned their methods inward. Listen, that's the sound of a rune carver's chisel biting into wood. Scraping, grinding, each stroke deliberate. 890 CE, a Norse merchant vessel bound for Baghdad. The manifest taking shape under weathered hands. 20 female slaves, prime breeding stock, for delivery to caliph's agents. The eastern trade routes, 3,000 miles of river and portage, from Sweden through Russia to the Caspian Sea, then overland to Baghdad, Constantinople, Damascus, where pale northern women brought prices that made Vikings risk everything. The infrastructure required for this journey staggers the mind. Way stations every 40 miles along the Volga, fortified compounds with standard specifications, fresh water, slave pens, medical facilities, the same drainage systems found in Dublin, in York, the same restraint points, the same collection pools for filtering out poison, each vessel modified for human cargo, extra beam width, lowered deck heights. But here's what the archaeologists noticed when they excavated the Staraya Ladoga shipyard: the ventilation systems, not random holes, precisely calculated gaps. Engineers had determined exactly how much air kept merchandise alive but weak. Too much oxygen meant resistance. Too little meant dead inventory. The Gotland picture stones show them. Women packed in ship holds. Artists carved every detail. The positioning, the restraints, the way bodies were stacked for maximum capacity. 50 to 70 per vessel. Each woman worth her weight in silver at journey's end. But the stones revealed something else. Guard positions. Armed men stationed not facing outward against attack, facing inward, watching the cargo, because by 890 CE the women had learned, had organized, had started fighting back even at sea. The Ibn Fadlan account from 922 CE, an Arab diplomat traveling the Volga, he describes Viking traders arriving with their human merchandise. The inspection process, women forced to strip. Teeth checked, pregnancies confirmed. The matter-of-fact tone of his writing makes it worse, like describing cattle. But these cattle had names, histories, children left behind. He mentions the suicide attempts, women throwing themselves into the river, swallowing their own tongues, starving themselves. The Vikings' response? Force-feeding tubes, suicide watches, chemical restraints, the same henbane cocktails perfected in York, the infrastructure of prevention as sophisticated as the infrastructure of transport. The ventilation systems revealed the truth about mortality rates. 920 CE. The excavation of a burned vessel near Novgorod. What they found rewrote everything. The ship hadn't burned by accident. The char patterns were wrong. This fire started from inside, from below decks, from the cargo hold. 83 skeletons in the wreckage, all female, all showing evidence of smoke inhalation. They died in the fire. But here's what made the archaeologists step back. The positioning. They weren't scattered, weren't trying to escape. These women had locked themselves in, had set the fire themselves. The evidence was in the details. Barricaded hatches. From the inside, wooden wedges jammed into doorframes. The women had prepared, had planned, had chosen burning over Baghdad. But one skeleton told a different story, found apart from the others, near the hull breach. Younger, maybe 16. Tool marks on the planking showed she'd tried to cut through, to escape, to live. The others had stopped her, held her, made sure she burned with them. Mercy or murder, the bones don't say. The salvage attempts revealed more. Vikings had tried to save the cargo, axe marks where they'd chopped at the barricades. But the women had prepared for that too. Oil residue throughout the hold. They'd doused everything, made sure the fire would spread too fast, made sure nothing valuable survived. This wasn't the first ship lost. The trade records from Constantinople mention others. Cargo lost in transit, weather damage, pirate attacks. But the insurance claims tell the truth. Too many losses. Too similar. The women had created their own kind of piracy, stealing themselves, denying profit to their captors. The Eastern trade adapted, smaller groups, more guards, drugs in the water supply, but the losses continued. The profit margins shrank. By 950 CE, the massive slave ships vanished from the archaeological record, replaced by smaller vessels. Faster routes. The industrial scale had become unsustainable. One burned ship changed everything, because the Vikings realized their merchandise had learned to think, to plan, to choose death on their own terms. The infrastructure of control was failing. The Eastern trade would never recover. But here's what haunts me about that burned ship. About those 83 women choosing fire. They knew what waited in Baghdad, in Constantinople, had heard the stories, the harems, the breeding programs, the specialized medical procedures to enhance fertility. They'd learned the Vikings were amateurs compared to what awaited at journey's end. The ventilation systems, the safety protocols, the force-feeding equipment, all useless against women who'd weaponized death itself, who'd turned suicide into sabotage, who'd discovered that burning cargo holds meant burning profits, burning reputations, burning the very economics of slavery. 980 CE approached. The eastern routes mostly abandoned, too dangerous, too expensive, too many ghost ships washing up on riverbanks. The Vikings turned inward, focused on closer markets, safer routes, but they'd learned fear. The merchandise might look broken, might seem subdued, but somewhere in those packed holds, women were counting days, measuring distances, planning. The runestones commemorate lost ships, lost investments, lost men, but never mention the women who made those losses happen, who turned transport vessels into funeral pyres, who made the eastern trade routes echo with the smell of smoke and the sound of their own choosing. As their empire crumbled, Vikings faced a choice about their own women who knew too much about the system they'd built. Listen, the grinding of millstones, but not grain between the stones, something harder, mercury ore, Norse women crushing cinnabar in the pre-dawn darkness, their hands already trembling from the toxic dust. 980 CE. The supply lines from Spain had dried up. Gunnhild's network controlled the southern routes, blocked the merchant ships, so the Norse turned to local sources, taught their own women the extraction process, the heating, the condensing, the collection of liquid death. The workshops spread through every major settlement. Uppsala, Trondheim, Hedeby, always on the outskirts, always staffed by women, because men wouldn't work the furnaces. Knew what mercury did to bodies, to minds, to unborn children. But women? Women could be ordered. The archaeological evidence makes my skin crawl. Specialized furnaces, condensation chambers, collection vessels, and everywhere, the bones of stillborn infants. Mercury poisoned in the womb, their mothers forced to keep working, keep producing, keep stockpiling the poison that would soon fill their own mouths. 981 CE. The Battle of Hjörungavágr. Norse fleet shattered. 3,000 warriors dead in a single day. The survivors limping home to find their world tilting. Saxon armies advancing. Irish raiders striking the coasts. The slaves' rebellions spreading. The infrastructure of terror finally turning brittle. But here's what the sagas don't mention. What the archaeologists found in settlement after settlement. Emergency caches. Hidden stockpiles. Not of weapons. Not of gold. Of mercury. Carefully sealed. Carefully measured. Enough for every woman and child in each community. The planning must have taken years. Secret meetings, whispered conversations at looms, messages passed at markets, because when they tested those caches, the doses were precise. Calculated by body weight, by age, fast-acting amounts for adults, smaller doses for children. Everything measured, everything prepared. 982 CE. The orders start coming down. Not written, nothing that direct. But women throughout the Norse world begin the same activities, teaching daughters specific prayers, practicing group ceremonies, discussing the afterlife with unusual intensity. The men, focused on military threats, barely notice. The fear shows in small ways. Increased guard rotations around women's quarters, new laws restricting female travel, prohibitions on gathering in groups larger than 3. The Jarls sense something. Can't name it, can't stop it. Like trying to hold smoke. Some families fracture completely. Norse women who'd profited from the slave trade suddenly understanding the cost, seeing their own daughters' futures if enemy armies arrived. The choice crystallizing, your child as slave or your child as corpse. The mercury workshops produce faster, stock more, wait. 983 CE. News arrives like hammer blows. Another fleet lost, another army scattered. The Irish have learned Norse tactics. The Saxons have better weapons. The Rus are in civil war. The empire doesn't fall, it bleeds out. One defeat at a time. The women's preparations intensify. They know what's coming, have seen it themselves, have maybe even participated. When Norse raiders brought home captives, when the auction blocks filled, when the breeding facilities operated at capacity, they know exactly what waits on the other side of defeat. Listen to that sound. Clay vessels being shaped, fired, tested, not for water, for mercury. Each woman preparing her own, decorating them, small personal touches. A daughter's name etched in the clay, a favorite pattern. These aren't just containers, they're funeral goods. 984 CE. The first confirmed mass poisoning. Small settlement near Orkney. 15 women and 6 children. Found in their longhouse. Mercury vessels still in their hands. The men had fled an Irish raid, left the women behind. The women made their choice. Word spreads through the whisper networks. It worked. The doses were right. The death was manageable. Other communities take note. Adjust their own preparations. The terrible arithmetic of suicide. How much mercury per person. How long it takes. How to help those who hesitate. The archaeological record shows the practice spreading. Settlement after settlement. The same clay vessels. The same mercury residue. The same group patterns. Women dying together. Holding each other. Some sites show evidence of music. Bone flutes left nearby. Harps still strung. They sang themselves to death. But here's what breaks me. The children's graves. Some mothers gave their children poppy extracts first, helped them sleep through what came next. Others let them choose. 8-year-olds with their own mercury vessels, their own decorated cups, their own terrible agency. 985 CE. The situation deteriorates faster. Norse military power collapses like a rotten floor. Suddenly, completely. Settlements that had stood for centuries face siege. The women inside have 2 choices. Wait for the walls to fall, or take control of their own endings. The suicide pacts formalize. Written agreements. Witnessed. Sealed. If the men fall in battle, if the walls are breached, if capture seems imminent, They'll gather in the main hall. They'll drink together. They'll die as they lived, as a community. Some men try to prevent it, lock up the mercury supplies, post guards. But the women have hidden reserves, have allies among the guards, have learned that every system of control has flaws. The very skills they'd learned from Gunnhild's rebellion now serve a darker purpose. One father's account survives, carved in runes on a memorial stone. Tried to save wife and daughters. They chose the poison over my protection. His grief leaks through the formal words. He'd failed them. But had he? What protection could he offer against their own methods turned back on them? The mercury workshops operate day and night now. The women working them know they're shortening their own lives. Don't care. Every batch produced means more choice, more control, more women who won't end up in breeding facilities, won't watch their children sold, won't become what they'd made others become. Winter 985, the coldest in memory. Rivers freeze, crops fail. Starvation weakens Norse defences further. But in the women's quarters, strange calm. They've made their choice, accepted their fate. The terror of uncertainty replaced by terrible certainty. On one cold morning in 986, the unthinkable order was given. Dawn breaks grey over Repton, 986 CE. The mist clings to the longhouse walls like burial shrouds. Inside, 236 Norse women kneel in perfect rows. Their breath forms clouds in the frozen air. Each cloud a prayer, each prayer a goodbye. The clay vessels wait before them, mercury gleaming like liquid moonlight, the metallic smell already thick, already burning nostrils. Some women clutch the vessels, others let them sit, watching, waiting. The youngest, barely 15 winters, braids her sister's hair one last time. Listen, the soft scrape of ceramic against wood as the first woman lifts her cup. Gyda, the Jarl's widow, still wearing the keys of household authority at her belt. Her voice steady as mountain stone. We know what comes. We've seen it. Done it. Better this. The mercury ripples as her hands tremble. Just once. Then she drinks. The sound of swallowing impossibly loud. Others watch her throat work. Count the gulps. 3, 4, 5. Enough. More than enough. Gyda sets down the empty vessel. Waits. The others see her pupils dilate. See the first tremor in her jaw. She nods. Permission. Agreement. It works fast, just as they'd measured, just as they'd planned. The cups lift like a wave across the hall. Mothers help daughters. Sisters support sisters. The mercury disappears into 236 throats. Some gag. Friends hold their heads. Tip the vessels higher. Make sure every drop goes down. Mercy wearing cruel faces. But the children. God, the children. 6 of them. The youngest barely 7 winters. They don't understand, can't understand. Their mothers gave them poppy milk first. Helped them drift to dreams before the mercury touched their lips. Small mercies in this careful massacre. The older ones, though, the ones who understood, they drank without help. Had decorated their own cups, painted butterflies, carved their names, chosen their ending like warriors choosing weapons. The convulsions start with Gyda. Her body jerks, spasms, the mercury attacking nerves, eating through soft tissue. The women nearby hold her, sing to her, old lullabies, battle hymns, anything to drown the sounds her throat makes. Some tried to run, the fear hitting harder than expected, the door barred from inside, their sisters catching them, gentle, firm, bringing them back to their places, to their cups, to their choice. Because outside those doors waited worse, waited everything they'd inflicted on Irish women, on Saxon women, on countless others whose names they'd never learned. The hall fills with sounds no human throat should make, frothing, choking, bodies thrashing against wooden floors, against each other, the careful rows dissolving into chaos, into writhing piles of poisoned flesh. But still the singing continues, though still conscious, maintaining the rhythm, the melody, the defiance. Astrid holds her daughter as the child convulses. 14 winters old, should be thinking about marriage. about her first household. Instead, she's dying in her mother's arms. Mercury foam pink with blood on her lips. Her last word, "Mama." Just that. Nothing more needed. The stronger ones help the weak. Force Mercury past clenched teeth. Hold thrashing limbs. Some women fight their own body's rebellion. Swallow their own vomit to keep the poison down. Determined. Absolute. They've made their choice. Won't let their bodies betray them now. Listen to the silence spreading. Voice by voice, breath by breath. The singing falters, stops, starts again weaker. The thrashing slows, bodies going rigid, then limp. The mercury completing its work with chemical precision. In the corner, two sisters die holding hands. Their fingers interlocked so tight the archaeological team couldn't separate them. Wouldn't try. Let them keep that last connection. That last proof that even in this horror, they weren't alone. The last woman to drink is Sigrid, the youngest mother. Her baby dead 3 days ago. Fever, not mercury. Natural death in unnatural times. She'd insisted on waiting, on watching, on making sure everyone else went first. Now she kneels alone among the dead, counts the bodies. 235. All still, all silent. She fills her cup, overflows it. No point in measuring now. No one left to help if she gets it wrong. The mercury tastes like silver coins, like blood, like all the choices that led to this moment. She drinks deep, drinks fast, lies down next to her friend Thora, takes her cooling hand, waits. Her vision fractures, doubles. The wooden beams above split into patterns, into pathways. She thinks she sees her baby, thinks she hears her mother calling. The convulsions start gentle, build violent, her body betraying her even as it obeys, even as it dies. The longhouse goes quiet, just wind through the gaps, just settling wood, just 236 women who chose mercury over memory, who chose poison over becoming what they'd made others, who chose control in the only way left. But as the last woman fell, Vikings thought they'd buried their secret forever. The mercury had done its work, 236 bodies cooling in neat rows, the longhouse silent except for settling wood. Outside, English warriors approach through morning mist. Their footsteps crunch on frozen grass. They expect resistance, expect Norse shields, Norse fury. They find only silence. The door splinters under Saxon axes. Light floods in. The smell hits first. Metal and vomit and death. Then they see them. Women and children arranged like sleeping congregants. Clay vessels still clutched in stiff fingers. Some holding each other. Mothers cradling daughters. Sisters intertwined. The English commander steps back. Orders his men out. This isn't victory. This is something else. Something that makes even battle-hardened warriors look away. They'd come for plunder. For slaves. For revenge. They found only Mercury's aftermath. But the Vikings hadn't buried their secret well enough. 900 years later, construction workers breaking ground for a car park. The mechanical digger's teeth catch something. Scrape. Stop. The operator climbs down. Sees bone gleaming in disturbed earth. Dr. Martin Biddle arrives within hours. The archaeologist knows Repton's history, knows its Viking connections, but nothing prepares him for what emerges from that soil, layer by layer, body by body. The careful excavation revealing a mass grave unlike any other. The positions tell him everything. These weren't battle casualties thrown in a pit. These women died together, organized, deliberate. The clay vessels scattered among them. The mercury residue still detectable, still deadly after 9 centuries. His team works in hazmat suits, the soil itself toxic, poisoned by 236 deaths. Each trowel scrape reveals more horror, more precision. The youngest skeleton breaks him. 7 years old, perfect preservation, her cup painted with butterflies. But it's the DNA extraction that rewrites history. Modern technology pulling genetic secrets from ancient bone. The results shock everyone. These weren't slaves. The isotope analysis proves it. These women grew up eating Norse food, drinking Norse water. They were Vikings who poisoned Vikings. Dr. Biddle publishes carefully, scientifically, but between the measurements and chemical analyses, the human story screams. Mothers who killed their own children rather than let them face what Vikings did to captives. Women who chose mercury's agony over their own methods turned against them. The genetic legacy spreads wider than Repton. Every Norse settlement showing the same pattern. Missing female lineages. Bloodlines that vanish abruptly around 986 CE. Not from warfare, from choice, from mercury, from knowing exactly what defeat meant. Modern Scandinavians carry this absence in their DNA. Genetic bottlenecks, where entire maternal lines disappear. The descendants of women who didn't drink mercury, who survived to breed, who lived with the knowledge of what their sisters chose. But Repton revealed something else. Something the excavation team kept quiet until they understood. Several skeletons showed healing mercury exposure, older damage. These women had worked the extraction sites, had prepared the poison that would kill them, had spent years destroying their bodies to create the means of their escape. The Archaeology conference goes silent when Dr. Biddle presents his findings. Scholars who've spent careers studying Viking expansion confronting the price. Not just paid by victims. Paid by Vikings themselves. Their own women choosing mass suicide over survival. Listen to fingers typing on keyboards. Modern geneticists tracing lineages. Finding gaps. Finding absences. Each missing branch a woman who chose mercury. Each gap a bloodline that ended in a longhouse. In a calculated dose. In a decorated cup. The Repton women knew history would find them. Left their jewelry on. Their best clothes. Their identity markers. They wanted to be known. Counted. Remembered as Norse women who looked at their culture's machinery and chose to break themselves rather than oil its gears. Some modern descendants take DNA tests, hoping to trace Viking roots. Find instead the echoes of Repton, of York, of Uppsala, missing great-grandmothers, absent lineages, the genetic scarring of systematic horror that consumed even those who created it. But here's what DNA revealed that shook researchers most. The women of Repton weren't unique. Isotope analysis of mass female graves across the Viking world showed the same pattern, the same generation, the same choice, coordinated, planned, thousands of Norse women deciding together that their empire deserved no future. The whisper networks hadn't just spread resistance, they'd spread the mathematics of mass suicide, the mercury preparations, the dosages, the ceremonies. From Ireland to Iceland, Norse women learning the same final lesson, that when you build a machine of horror, eventually it turns. Eventually it grinds up even those who built it. Dr. Biddle stands in the reconstructed longhouse at Repton. Tourists snap photos where women drank poison, where children died in their mother's arms, where an empire admitted its crimes in mercury and convulsions. The tour guide speaks of Viking glory, of exploration, of trade networks. But Dr. Biddle sees only absences, hears only silence, knows that under every Viking settlement lie more Reptons, more women who chose, more bloodlines that ended rather than continue. The mercury worked exactly as they'd measured, exactly as they'd planned. The genetic evidence keeps mounting, modern populations showing scars of ancient choices. Every DNA test a small revelation, every family tree growing roots that end abruptly, in mercury, in silence, in women who knew exactly what they were worth in their own culture's arithmetic. The Vikings conquered nations, built trade networks spanning continents, created art, law codes, literature, but they also created a system so horrific their own women chose mercury over survival, chose to end bloodlines rather than feed them into the machine. Listen, that's the sound of consequences. Not in battles, not in burned cities, in the quiet closing of genetic doors, in empty cradles, in decorated cups filled with liquid metal. In 236 women showing the world exactly what the Viking Age had become. History remembers Viking warriors, Viking explorers, Viking merchants, but history forgot Viking women who looked at what their men had built and chose annihilation over complicity, who turned their culture's weapon against themselves rather than become what they'd made others. The excavations continue. More sites, More mass graves, more evidence of coordinated suicide. Each one tells the same story. Norse women who chose their ending, who drank deep, who died together, who left only silence and the faint taste of mercury on history's tongue.